It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Bill Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
And good evening, everybody. Welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Football Friday edition. Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, Professor Tom Hayes, and Brian Leonard all together as we look ahead to this weekend of college football, high school football tonight. Several games were played last night. Going to touch on all of that for you tonight here on Sports Talk. Very, very busy Friday night for you. We'll have the football filibuster with the governor and the lieutenant governor coming up. Lee Sterling will be along with his Sterling picks. He wasn't so Sterling last week. The old 0 for 3 on his picks for us. We'll have David Shelton talking about the high school playoffs tonight around the state as the high school league teams get into it. Some played last night. Opposition research by Will on the opponents for the Gamecocks and the Tigers this weekend. And Ellis Johnson with his 4th and goal breakdown of the games for us coming up later tonight. So it's a full edition of Sports Talk on this Friday night. So as we look ahead to South Carolina, Florida, guys, and Clemson, Boston, I see where some of the talking heads picked up on my idea last night about the weather in Boston, 34 degrees, and Clemson having played in an average temperature of 73 degrees. And how's that going to affect everybody?
It won't. It won't.
They've cold hands mean drop passes.
You act like these guys
footballs.
have never played in weather before. Like, come on, man. Like, there's nothing that can stop this Clemson offense other than themselves. And if I think that this offense is as good as I think it is, I think that this Boston College defense should be no match for them. The more and more I think about this, I think we're all overthinking this. I think Clemson is on an unstoppable string, an unstoppable streak on their way to Miami. They'll get through this game. They'll get through the Duke game. They'll blow out South Carolina. They're going to take over whatever patsy meets them in the ACC championship that comes out of the Coastal. This should not be a game that you worry about because, quite honestly, they haven't had to worry since the Syracuse game and beyond.
Well, the key point is the weather would have been a factor if there was any wintry mixed precipitation involved. But I understand it's going to be clear. Kickoff will probably be in the mid 40s. And by that time, Clemson would have had built up a comfortable margin.
Not exactly like it's been, summer here, Corn. It's been rather ugly. I mean, it's not been 40, it's not been 30, but it's not like they haven't had the opportunity to practice in some sort of the elements, And again, it's going to be clear. There's going to be no precip. The weather, I don't see how much of it really makes a difference for them. It's a lazy narrative for anybody who is literally trying to turn this game into something that it's not, which is a close one. I think it's not going to be that close.
Well, I want to put on one of Pro's toupees for a moment and think like he does, and that is the conspiracy theorist that he is. The ACC does not want Clemson to lose this game. They are not going to let Clemson lose. Neither will ABC because, of course, who wants to see a Boston College-Pittsburgh ACC championship game on ABC at 8 o'clock on December the 8th? Who wants to see that? Nobody. So all I'm saying is watch out for any close calls in the game that could go either way, and let's see how many of those happen to go Clemson's way.
I don't think that they'll need that kind of help. I really don't. I look at this game almost the same way as I look at the NC State game, which had a very, very similar spread. And we're all looking at it and saying, what does Vegas know that we don't know? And I think it's going to be another situation, maybe very much like that NC State game, where Clemson puts up 30 to 40 points. Boston College maybe counters with 14 or 15, and Clemson gets an easy cover. Again, this conference is garbage. You saw what happened to NC State last night against Wake Forest. They looked like garbage there at the end of the game. And if that's the team that allegedly was the second best team in the ACC Atlantic, then my gosh, Corn, this entire division, this entire conference outside of Clemson is just a sham and a mockery.
Now you're taking something away from Wake now.
Stop it.
Look.
That same team that Clemson played its whole travel roster against?
Remember the defensive front that NC State had last year?
Yeah.
Wake beat them last year too. So that's 2 in a row for Wake over NC State.
I don't believe in anybody in this conference that doesn't wear orange and purple. I'm just saying.
There's no place for the ACC to hide this year in football. There's no place to hide. It was a sham for them to have 3 other teams ranked in the top 25 by the College Football Playoff Committee. And NC State, like you said last night, I mean, you don't blow a 10-point fourth-quarter lead at home to a team playing with its backup quarterback that's not a good team to begin with, even with its starting quarterback. That should not happen if you're a top 20 team.
At home.
Yeah.
Darn it.
At night.
So anyway, South Carolina and Florida. Let's turn our attention to the Gamecocks and the Gators, and the Gamecocks, the underdogs, but I don't know. They don't feel like underdogs to me. Florida seems to be the scrambling team this week, and that's because they're coming off 2 losses. They lost a quarterback who might have been the starter Saturday. They seem to be the team that's coming unhinged this week.
Who's the one team that I've basically used as my perpetual whipping boy in the SEC this season? It's Florida. I've discounted every success they've had.
But then you got nervous when they started.
I discounted every particular good thing that happened to them. I said, they'll show their true faces. They'll show their true faces. And unfortunately for them, they showed their true faces over the last 2 weeks against Georgia and Missouri. Having said that, I have no real conviction that South Carolina can put its best game on the field on Saturday because of the deficiencies they have in the secondary. I don't know if that effort we saw at Ole Miss will truly represent itself. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I don't know if that favors the Gamecocks. I really don't think so. I think that a lot of this looks like kind of a, 21-17, 21-14 kind of game. I think it's a mucky type game. Mm-hmm. I don't think Felipe Franks gets in a rhythm. I don't think the South Carolina offense gets in a rhythm. I think either team can win this game by a touchdown or 2 touchdowns. I don't have as much conviction in South Carolina as I do Florida. That's why in my picks, I had to go with Florida just because they're the home team and they're favored. I think that Vegas, again, is looking at this and saying, you know what? If you want to actually bet this game, stay away from it because The line only moved about a point when Felipe Franks was named the starter instead of Kyle Trask, and that tells me that they don't even know what the heck's going to happen on Saturday.
Well, the key point of South Carolina is quite interesting. A lot of what South Carolina has done this year has been psychological.
Mystical.
In games, they've beaten themselves. They seem to, as Muschamp gets into the season, they tend to make fewer mistakes than they do at the beginning of the year, and that's where they are right now. I think this is a battle-tested team, especially with the injuries. I think guys are saying, look, next man up, and they're following through. If it's a close game, you got to bet on Muschamp. Muschamp, since he's been in South Carolina, if that game was within a touchdown or 10 points, they're usually on the winning side.
I like South Carolina in a mucky kind of game, as you put it, Will. I think that's in their favor. I think they want to see a 21, 28-point game. I think that works exactly with what Muschamp wants to do, unless they have an offensive explosion like they had against Ole Miss. Now, I am a little bit concerned about their injury situation. If they were facing a quarterback who was considered a true down-the-field passer who could complete passes, I'd be even more concerned. Franks hasn't proved that. He might get hot tomorrow and show that he can. But then again, I think South Carolina's pass rush could have a good day, and you could see a lot of Wanham coming off the edge and getting to this big guy in the backfield. I am going with the Gamecocks, getting the points. If I need the points, I'll be happy to take them. May not need the points. I'm taking Clemson. I'm laying the 19.5 up at Boston College. I agree with you. Boston College, player for player, pound for pound, no contest with Clemson's speed. I expect the Tigers to do what they did up there a couple of years ago when they thought it was going to be a tight game, and the BC fans packed Alumni Field, and they were all excited. And what happened was Clemson came out and scored like the third or fourth play and took the air right out of that balloon. So I look for the Tigers to score early and probably often in this one as well.
And there will be, according to the reports that we're getting, a lot of orange in Chestnut Hill, and there's already a lot of orange on the Boston Harbor already on this Friday night.
As well as some iced tea in there as well. Okay, we'll be back in just a moment.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
We will bring you our usual Friday fare here on a Football Friday here on Sports Talk. We have our football filibuster coming up with the governor and the lieutenant governor as well. Professional picks with Lee Sterling. Opposition research. We'll get into Boston College and Florida's chances this weekend in our first two segments of hour two. We'll do a little NASCAR with Monty Dutton, and also fourth and goal with Ellis Johnson to close out the week with Clemson and South Carolina. But first, we'll look at the Palmetto State High School playoff picture with our high school sports report brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. With Fave Rates from Farm Bureau Insurance, you get all of your favorite things like competitive rates, local agents, and great claim service for all your auto, home, and life insurance needs. Get a no-obligation quote today at faverates.com.
And we welcome in David Shelton of the High School Sports Report, Charleston Post and Courier, for a look at the action from last night. We had some playoff games last night, and the action coming up tonight as the high school league teams now are fully engaged in the playoffs, and the SCISA teams go into round number 2. So, David, last night, not a lot of close contests. Northwestern putting 54 on the board against Boiling Springs. Whitmire wins. Daniel, Abbeville rolls. Union County, a big winner. York over OW. Central gets a shutout win over Landrum. And Southside Christian, big winner over Silver Bluff. And Dorman just blows out Greenwood 52-0. Very impressive by the Cavaliers, maybe sending a message down the road to look out for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dorman's going to be, hanging around near the end of November. So I don't think that was much of a surprise. They're a very good team. They've had a very good season, but the upper state is so competitive. You got Sumter and Gaffney and Burns, and it's just going to be a dogfight. The winner of that is going to really earn their way into Williams Brice Stadium.
Coach Gutshaw really built his reputation on a wide-open offense and throwing it around, and quarterbacks compiling big numbers. This team doesn't necessarily have, as far as I know, a whole heck of a lot of major college talent. I know a lineman who's committed to Duke and maybe another one who's emerging, but do they have the great skill players that he's had over the years at Dorman?
Oh, yeah. They're good at the skill positions. I mean, Jacoby Featney's one of the best receivers in the state. The running back, Thomas Morgan. I want to say his name's Thomas Morgan. I get these names confused, but I think it's Thomas Morgan. Went over 1,000 last year. He's over 1,000 this year. Yeah, they have skill people. They're very dynamic offensively. Can move the football through the air. Can run it. Kind of reminiscent of the team they had. The team that had Adam Humphreys on it. They were very balanced. They could do it a couple of ways. And this team is very similar to that one.
Yeah, I forgot about Pinckney, committed to Virginia Tech. So, yeah, he's a good one. Who's the quarterback? Who's the trigger man for him?
I can't remember his name, but he's been very consistent. I looked at his stats. The name escapes me, but he was a guy that was kind of a backup, for the last couple of years, and it was his turn. And he's been very consistent, put up good numbers, high percentage completion. And of course, with receivers, you can do that. But, he's been very solid. I mean, they're a very good offensive team. Of course, they're pretty good on defense usually as well. But this team's going to be able to score. And actually, they've scored a lot of points in even the games, they lost. They've been very successful offensively.
All right, visiting with David Shelton of the High School Sports Report, Charleston Post and Courier, High School Football Report here on Sports Talk as we hit the most crucial time of the year, the playoff season. So tonight, as you look through the classes, any particular games jump out to you as being ones that are going to be particularly competitive? I know in the first round, oftentimes we get just a ton of blowouts, mismatches, but maybe in some of the seeded areas where you got closer seeds, you're going to see some good games.
Yeah, I mean, the 2-3 games, there'll be several of those that'll be competitive. 3 beating a 2 is not that big a deal because it depends on what conference you're in. You could be a third-place team from a very good conference versus a runner-up from a not-so-good conference. And, 3 beats 2 because they played a tougher schedule. But, I think Wren Greenville. Is it Wren and Greenville that are playing?
Yeah.
I think that's one of those that's going to be fun to see how that ends up, because that's two really good offenses and two teams that have given up points on defense. So, I mean, that literally could be a 52-50 type game in the last 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I was looking kind of in that same area there with, Daniel and Eastside, and even the one that I'm looking at too, maybe River Bluff Conway could be one that you look at, David, just because, like I said, those teams come up and they're pretty evenly matched, especially when you think about this deal with Conway having to try to come back off of all the stuff with the Storms. That's a motivated group out there.
Yeah, I think they'll be motivated because they're in the playoffs. They had a chance to compete for the region title and lost to West Florence last week. But to tell you, River Bluff's really good. River Bluff's gonna the game I'm at tonight, Berkeley Irmo. If Berkeley wins and River Bluff wins, they'll play next week, and that'll be a really good second round matchup. River Bluff is for real. I mean, I don't know that you would call them a state title contender, but certainly. I feel like they should win tonight, and of course Daniel handled Eastside pretty easily last night in that game. They moved up, but we'll see. I mean, there could be some upsets. I cannot see a 4 beating a 1 anywhere in any division, but you just never know. But playoffs can be so wacky, and it's been a wacky season anyway. So I guess we should expect some crazy things to happen.
In the AA ranks, you see a good a tight game against Hannah Pamplico and Bamberg Earhart?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bamberg's the better team, but Hannah Pamplico is certainly not going to be a pushover. I mean, they're a very competitive team. They opened the season to beat Lakeview. They've had some good wins. Bamberg has just played a really good schedule. They play in that tough conference over there with Barnwell and Barnwell and I can't remember who the other team is, but Woodland. So I think Hannah Pamplico will compete, and they'll keep it close, but I just think Bamberg's a better team.
Yeah, I see my Atlanta Vikings are actually here in Columbia to play. We're so good they have to put us up against a small college, Gray Collegiate, in the first round. You give us any chance in this one?
Atlanta? Yeah, that's a winnable game. I mean, Great Collegiate's got a really good quarterback, and they've had a great season. But Latta plays tough football. I mean, can you go on the road and win? I mean, that's one thing. But Great Collegiate's certainly not going to overpower Latta. Latta will bring it physically. So, but they better be able to defend the pass, because that Helms kid can throw it around the yard.
Don't give my man false hope, David. Give it to him straight.
I like doing that.
Give him to him straight. Tell him they're going to lose.
He better go watch some of that game if they're in Columbia. He better go.
Now,
Quit teasing me.
How about 96 in Chesterfield, man? My Wildcats are in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the Wildcats are going to win tonight. Chesterfield, another team that can throw it around a little bit, but they're not great defensively, and I think 96 is just going to power run the game. I think they're going to power over them and get ahead and stay ahead. And 96 is pretty good. I mean, they're a team that I still don't see anybody beating Abbeville, but they're certainly a team that can compete.
David, have yourself a great night. Looking forward to talking to you later on. We'll have our high school scoreboards playoff editions tonight at 10, 10:30, and 11. We will be the place to come to bring you the scores from across the state. Thank you, David.
Okay, man. Take care.
David Shelton, also known as Bib around here, is best in business, and he'll be with us again later on as we bring you the scores tonight from across the state.
Not to be outdone, Corn, there is some basketball tonight with the two biggins, Clemson and South Carolina. Clemson home to North Carolina Central, South Carolina home to Stony Brook, both playing their second contests of the season. So we'll be keeping a casual eye on those, about as casually as we can on this Friday night.
Yes, absolutely. See if South Carolina can play a cleaner game than they did the first time out, and see if Clemson can build on its good offensive showing, 100 points in the opener earlier this week. And there's other basketball, too. In fact, Charleston Southern is playing tonight over in Gainesville. Gamecock fans who are making the trip might want to stop in there and check out the Bucks as they take on Florida, which lost its opener to Florida State this week. back with the football filibuster. Well, you know, Election Day, whether Will Muschamp knew it or not, was on Tuesday, which means, of course, politicians have gone away for a while, except for these two gentlemen who join us here on Sports Talk. We would never get rid of them because they are two of the greatest politicians, leaders that we've ever had in the state of South Carolina. And if they were running this week, by God, I might vote for one of them. Just not saying which one. We welcome in former Governor Jim Hodges and former Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer. Governor Hodges, how are you?
Well, I'm fine, but Andre and I are both now statesmen since we've been out of office long enough. How about that?
Is that what happens? You become statesman?
We like to think so.
Yeah. Andre, how are you this evening, sir?
I'm good. I'm still waiting on my statue.
It's coming. It's being commissioned.
After Asia's gets put up, you'll get yours.
Yes. First things first. They're done in order of importance. Hey, if you had to have a statue made and you had to have somebody stand in for you for them to draw, who would you choose?
Jeff Gordon.
Oh, I see it. Yes. And you kind of drive like him, too.
He's a little slower than me.
He also likes to gamble, too. I don't know about I know your thoughts on that, Mr. Bauer.
All right, well, let's get to the football filibuster for tonight. And as soon as I get my sheet to open up here, I can tell you that the governor continues to pace the competition here as we head towards the home stretch. But don't forget, we still have the bowl season to come, and the bowl season will give us plenty of opportunity for movement in the standings. Let's see. Last week, the governor went 3-2, and the LG went 4-1. Andre, good week for you.
Thank you. We're picking up a little bit at a time.
All you got to do is nip away. Nip, nip, nip. You're 26-24. The governor is 30-20. And so both are doing well. It's a good competition. We've got 5 games ready for you this week, so let's get to it. And, Andre, we'll let you lead off, considering you are still trailing. We'll let you have the first crack at it here. We'll begin with a football game that truly nobody in North Carolina cares about. If they were playing basketball now, this would be an exciting weekend. It's North Carolina at Duke, and Duke is the home favorite by 10.5. Andre, what do you think?
Golly, I'm going to take North Carolina.
All right.
Okay, Tar Heels it is. Maybe some of them can go and stop at Duke and get a good education while they're there for the weekend. Governor Hodges, you think what, sir?
I'm going to take Duke. I think Fedora and the boys have packed it in, and they are waiting for basketball. Well, basketball season started there, but they're waiting for the real part of the ACC season to start. So I'm going to take Duke.
Yeah. Where's the Tar Heel basketball team playing tomorrow? Anybody know? That will have an impact on their attention span there in Chapel Hill. Don't know if they're home or just where.
They are they're at Elon tonight, Corn. Actually, they're opening up the Elon Arena. We told you about that earlier in this week. So they actually are on the road.
What are they on, sort of a mercy tour, playing at Wofford and then going up the road to Elon?
Told you that Roy loves to play these games on the road.
It's interesting because Dean Smith would never play a lower level in-state team in-state when he was in North Carolina.
That is true. Only in Charlotte would he play.
Roy's charitable. He gives out fake degrees and road basketball games to lower level schools. So they're charitable like that.
All right, to the SEC. We've got Mississippi State at Alabama. Mississippi State, the next one to try to depose the champs. In Alabama at home, favored by 23.5. Governor Hodges.
Well, first of all, remind me, was Elon not the Fighting Christians at one point, or was that Guilford? I'm trying to remember which.
Yeah, they were the Fighting Christians.
They're now the Phoenix.
The Fighting Christians.
They're now the Phoenix.
Guilford is the Quakers, or was the Quakers.
Okay. And the Fighting Christians with Elon. A great trivia question for someone. Well, look, I can't pick against Alabama. As well as Alabama has played all year, I think they're ready for the NFL. So I'll take Bama.
Yeah, Alabama will be the first-round pick of a NFL team. The entire team would be a first-round pick. Andre, what do you think? Alabama laying the 23.5 or Mississippi State getting the points?
I'm going to take Bama.
You want Bama as well? You got them. All right. Let's go to another SEC game, the South's oldest rivalry, Auburn at Georgia. Georgia favored by 14. Andre.
I'm going to take Georgia.
Georgia at home. Funny things happen in this game, but I tend to agree with you. The Governor.
I love Georgia in this game. I think Georgia is going to handle Malzahn and the boys pretty easily.
Auburn fans are they must be the nuttiest group in the country because, I mean, you just signed Malzahn to a 7-year contract after last season. All right. Everything's looking great. So, they're taking a couple of losses here and there this year, not going to have a great year. And, there's already talk about him being on the hot seat, buying him out, et cetera, et cetera. It just ain't going to happen. You're going to have to live with him for a while.
Texas A&M fans would like a word about that Zanius comment or Zanius fan base accusation there, Corn. They're pretty zany themselves.
We go to all right, let's go to the locals, guys. And let's go with Governor Hodges. You've got your Fighting South Carolina Gamecocks in Gainesville against Florida, getting 6 points on the road. Governor Hodges.
I'm going to take the Gamecocks in this one. I don't know that they're going to win, but I think 6 points is a little too much for this game, and Florida certainly was exposed last week to some of the problems that they've got. They still have quarterback issues there, and Jake played a tremendous game last week. I'll take the Gamecocks.
Mm-hmm. Andre?
I'm going to take the Gamecocks as well.
Mm-hmm. For what reasons? You just want to say ditto to the governor? You got your own thinking there.
Well, number one, it's my team. I managed to get out of there in 4.5 years. I'm thankful they let me out. But the Gamecocks have looked good. I'm an eternal optimist. They pull this game off, and they're headed for a great bowl game. And so I'd love to see them win. And so anything can happen, and they're going to head down the road there, and hopefully he'll bring the boys ready to play.
What did you do with that extra half year you were in college? You don't remember?
I think I know what I did. I got enough classes to graduate. I think on the program I was at, I think I may have not taken enough classes to quite finish up in 4 years.
Okay. And our last game is Clemson at Boston College. Game day will be there to add excitement to the area. And the Tigers are favored by 19.5. Andre, is this where Clemson stubs its toe?
Nope. Clemson gonna cover.
Easy cover for the Tigers.
Smart man.
They had 1 or 2 weeks where they didn't cover. Other than that, they've covered every week.
Governor, you say what?
All you need to know is that Louisville came within 20 points of Boston College. So I think that's all I need to know about the game. I'm going to take the Tigers.
All right, you got him. So, Andre, you're trailing. There's only a 1-game difference here between the two of you on the picks. Are you happy, or would you like to amend?
No, I'm happy. It's all going to boil down to North Carolina and Duke.
North Carolina and Duke it is. All right, we'll see how it works out for you guys. We thank you very much. Have a great weekend. I know you're glad the election season's behind you. You can relax a little bit, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you guys.
Thank you, Governor Jim Hodges, Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer with us here on Sports Talk.
North Carolina and Duke, part of the weekly offering from the ACC that is would be a better basketball game than a football game. Usually there's one of those every week.
Well, I mean, look, it's a great basketball league. Let's give it ACC its due. It's a great basketball league. It's having a down season in football. There's no other way to cut it. And, ACC better be very thankful that it has Clemson.
Yeah, they are.
Because, I mean, Clemson is not letting the rest of the league bring it down. I mean, they're playing at a very high level. They're not impacted by the rest of the league.
If I'm Dabo in those ACC meetings, I'm looking at the other 13 football coaches and saying, come on, give me some. Get better, darn it.
ESPN, when they started ACC Network, they're going to say, you better give us some.
Time to put your money where your mouth is. Put them in field, let them fight it out. He's a hustler. If you don't got X, you won't be getting no sticks. And if you don't got money, you want some money. If you don't got cash, you won't be getting no. He's a gambler. At the house on the young and then we got change.
Show them the next item up for bid.
Well, I sure hope you didn't take the Panthers last night up at Pittsburgh. You probably would have lost your shirt for sure on that one. Let's welcome in some professional help to all of us who need it at this particular time, and that is, of course, Lee Sterling of Paramount Sports, who did not have such a good week last week, everything being told honestly, 0-3 on his picks here with us. However, you know, everybody has an off weekend. You can bounce back and have a great weekend. Lee, how you doing?
Good. At least I didn't have Carolina last night. Didn't have anything. But, yeah, I almost never will take a road team against an established power on a short week. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, well, that's what happened last night. Boy, did the Panthers step into it big time. Before we move forward and get your thoughts on this weekend, for folks who want to dial you up and get your good stuff, how can they do that?
Well, just go to my website, ParamountSports.com, and we've been doing this show about how many years? What do you think, Phil?
Oh, I'm going to say closing in on about 10.
Yeah, and I've been in business 27 years. I rate my games from 10 to 50 units. And I've never told you this, but I have a 9 set of criteria when I handicap a game. And, you know, I rate them from 10 to 50 units. A normal 15 to 25 unit play might be 5 check marks on one side, 2 on the other. A big play might be 5-1 or 6-1. First time ever I worked out a game, and it's 9 check marks on one side and none on the other. So I knew immediately this has to be a 45, 50 unit game. And I even worked it out 2 times to make sure I saw everything correctly. First time ever, I'm going to release a 100-unit selection, and it's in the NFL. Ooh. So never done this in 25 years, and just feel that strongly I have the right side. So if someone wants to get involved, they can purchase the game individually, $97, or get a month of action, 4 weeks of action from now through Monday, December 3rd, for $397 with the coupon code SAVE200, and I'll also guarantee the game, which I've never done. If I don't win the game and you purchase a 4-week package, I'll give you the rest of the season for free.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can't lose on that, right? That's hard to say in this business.
No. And I've only had one losing week. We lost all 3 games on the show last week in college. I've only had one losing week in the NFL. NFL, I've just had a great season, so I think it will continue with this one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get to the games for this week. And you want to begin with the Georgia-Auburn game where Georgia's favored by 2 touches.
You know, and a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, you were watching this Auburn offense. You're thinking, this is one of the toughest offenses to stop. But people figured it out. And also the personnel is just not there right now for Auburn. They cannot run the football. They used to run for 250 to 450 on everyone. Now they've only had one game the entire season against the Division I team where they ran for 150 yards, and that was against Ole Miss, which we all know is a Division II defense right now. The offensive line, you watch your offensive line in passing situations, and I mean teams are running simple twists on them and 4-man fronts and just blitzing an outside linebacker, and guys are running unabated to the quarterback. They got some real problems on offense. Georgia, consistent 5 double-digit SEC wins this year. Every one of their wins, they've scored at least 34 points. Give me the consistent winning team. Georgia, they win and cover this game 35-13.
Yeah, I'm not picking against Georgia anymore this season. I'm done trying to outsmart Georgia.
I tried that one. I smart myself, too. I'm done, too.
Yeah, I'm not going to play that game anymore. All right, let's go to the locals here, and let's begin with the Gamecocks in Gainesville for the Gators. Gamecocks are getting 6. What do you think?
Florida had some momentum at one point, 5-game winning streak. Now it's done. They lost to Georgia and Missouri, and they were not competitive in either game. Here's what's crazy. You watch their games. They got receivers open all over the field. They just can't hit them. And if they get any decent quarterback play, I mean, they'd be in a good spot. Not saying they would have beaten Georgia, but they would have played with them. They would have won the game last week. Their defense doing their job, holding opponents to 37 yards per game less than their opponent allows. And Jake Bentley he's probably due for a bad game. Not a game I'm going to be involved in, but we pick the locals all the time every week. Florida, I think they're suckering you into taking South Carolina. That's the only real strong take on this game. Florida 28-20.
I'm telling you, this is a game that Vegas wants no part of. I keep telling you that. They want no part
either
of
that
it.
or, like I said, it's a sucker's play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Massachusetts. Clemson laying 20 in the cold against the Eagles. Now, you'll be impressed with my stat of the week. Clemson's been playing in an average temperature this year of 73 degrees. It's going to be around freezing by the time they get to halftime there at Boston College. Any impact?
Yeah, it could have an impact, but here's the problem. If they just have to run the ball, Clemson's good at that also. Travis Etienne in the game last year against BC averaged 12 yards a carry. A.J. Dillon, not 100%. That doesn't help you in the cold. He only had 57 in the game last year. He's not 100%. Clemson won the last 2 years 34-7 and 56-10, and now you got Trevor Lawrence. If he wasn't playing well, maybe you look to the underdog, but he's playing at a high level. And BC has lost both games to teams that can throw the football, and it wasn't pretty against Purdue and NC State. Give me Clemson here, 38-14.
Yep, not outsmarting myself with the Tigers anymore either. Riding them all the way to the end.
Right.
Game of the week, you've got Alabama laying 24 against Mississippi State.
Yeah, they want to get this game. Just call me here at the office, 800-400-9741. We'll give them this game, put it in their back pocket so they can start off the weekend. Nice win. 800-400-9741 to get the game for free. And like I said, if you want to get my first ever 100-unit max play, it's available. First ever in 27 years. Just go to ParamountSports.com.
Wow, big weekend. Thank you, Lee. We appreciate it. Talk to you next week. Good luck.
Thanks, Phil.
Lee Sterling, Paramount Sports, our Sterling picks here on Sports Talk. Let's give you the recruiting before we hit the top of the hour. Talk about place kicker Axel LePro in the 2020 class out of Bradenton, Florida. Going to be back at USC for the Chattanooga game. He was also in for Missouri. The family plans to spend the weekend in Columbia. I think the interest there appears to be growing. He went to Harvard last week. He's going to Cincinnati later in the month. His only offer to this point is from Southern Miss. He's also getting interest from Kentucky. He's really liking South Carolina, though. He's a left-footed kicker with a very strong leg, as we told you before, born in France and moved to Florida in the 6th grade. This season, 2 for 2 on field goals with a long of 45 and 35 of 36 on extra points. Offensive lineman Ron Carr of Solon, Ohio, has drawn interest from Clemson. He decommitted from Yale last night. He has set officials with Vandy, Rice, Duke, and he also plans to visit Southern Cal. 2020 receiver Jalen Coit of Cheraw plans to visit Duke tomorrow, has an offer from the Blue Devils. Offensive lineman Nigel Jenkins is 6'4", 350 of Southside Christian. He was at USC for the Tennessee game. He'd love for the Gamecocks to turn up the interest. He really enjoyed that visit, he said. Kentucky and Memphis are 2 schools showing the most interest. He'll visit Memphis this weekend. Other visits of note for the weekend include Clemson targets offensive lineman, defensive end Cooper Dawson of Hanahan to UCF, linebacker Quavaris Crouch of Charlotte to Tennessee. He's also a USC target. Offensive lineman Trevor Keegan of Crystal Lake, Illinois, and Clay Webb of Oxford, Alabama to Georgia. And USC target athlete Xavier Leggett of Mullins is going to Tennessee. And USC landed another baseball commitment today, this from a right-hander, Brandon Jordan. He's a freshman at Cowley College in Kansas. He's a native of Collinsville, Oklahoma. There you go with recruiting. Check out our recruiting over the weekend. We'll update things as things happen. Our website, SportsTalkSC.com. On Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting. All right, we have got opposition research starring Will Pelagic coming up. And then we'll have Monty Dutton and Ellis Johnson to close it out here on Sports Talk.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, as we're getting ready for the weekend here, as we look at the two opponents for South Carolina and Clemson. Of course, South Carolina plays Florida. We'll look at them a little later. We now take a look at the Boston College Eagles that come in 7-2 overall, 4-1 in the league. The man who is the radio voice of the Boston College Eagles, John Metaperl, joining us here on Sports Talk. All right, John, we sit here. This is a game I had circled on my calendar before the year began as a potential pitfall for Clemson. BC has certainly responded in kind. John, what do the Eagles look like this year? It was a team that gave Clemson a fourth-quarter game last year, and it seems like this year it shouldn't be any different.
I don't think it will be, Will. I think BC has a real quiet swagger and confidence about them. I mean, you got to understand, too, that this is the game that BC circles every year. Clemson is the game. Clemson is the game they want to shock the world. They know Clemson's on top of the college football world with Alabama. And what better way to do it on a Saturday night when it's 35 degrees, clear weather, BC football, hitting, grinding, powerful football. Northeast brand, knock them in the mouth, knock them off the ball. That's what the Eagles want to do on Saturday. It's all about controlling the line of scrimmage. I think BC has the best offensive line in the league, and I think they're ornery. I think they feel a little bit disrespected in some circles this week, which is always kind of a dangerous word, but I think they feel like they've been a little bit unheralded all year. And we've seen their running attack gain many yards, of course, led by A.J. Dillon, and also they have a stable of backs now. So I think this is going to be a game where BC can make some pull some rabbits out of the hat, so to speak.
This is certainly the best year that Steve Adazio has had at Boston College. 7 wins, 5 out of the 6 years, and more than likely to surpass that, even if they do not win this weekend. You have a winnable game against Florida State next week, but not necessarily to look ahead. But how has he gotten this group and gotten this team to personify him? Because it seems like no team looks as much like their head coach and preaches as much as their head coach does as Boston College, at least in this conference.
I think you know going in what you're getting. I think he does a great job with his staff selling that type of firebrand football. I think Dabo Swinney has said it throughout the week. He knows that BC's built on that. They're built on that smash mouth. Yeah, they still want to throw the ball. They still want to be balanced, but it's the bread and butter game. It's building from the middle of the field in. It's building a tenacious team. It's building a team that's full of people that are not only good players, but great students too. We know BC's a top 20 caliber school in academics. So there's so many things that go into recruiting at BC, but one thing he's done is kind of bring the old Northeast brand back. He's recruited Pennsylvania. He's recruited New Jersey. He's mining New York. He's mining Boston. He's mining Connecticut. He's mining all the neighboring states that he needed to do. When he came here, he said he wanted to lock down the borders. And there's a lot of good players in this area. I see Christian Wilkins as one of them. Mm-hmm. I know BC was hoping to get him when he was available, but I think that's what he's brought. It's the mantra. It's a continuing pound the rock type mantra that the players love. They buy into it. Of course they do, because the players nowadays, they want a coach like that, like a Dabo Swinney or like a Steve Adazio, who's got some charisma.
Of course, we're looking at Boston College with John Metaperl, the voice of Boston College on Opposition Research here on Sports Talk. The $64,000 question you do not have the answer to, John, just because we don't know whether A.J. Dillon will be available. How does that affect them? How does his presence in the lineup affect Boston College positively? And how does his presence out of the lineup affect them and their ability to run the football?
Well, I think he will be available. I don't know anything as far as that goes officially, but I do think he will play. He really hasn't been 100% since that injury, and he still put up 95 last week. So I think he will be available. If he does play, it certainly changes their offensive complexion. He's certainly an amazing back. He's an anomaly in terms of what BC has seen. He's the best back BC's ever had. So there's definitely a huge boost there for the Eagles. But the good news is for them is that they have, as I mentioned, Travis Levy, David Bailey, who didn't even play last week because Levy stepped in and looked like an all-ACC back last week at Virginia Tech. And then you have a kid named Ben Glines as well, who's really flashed, including at NC State. So there's a stable there. They're replenished. to Adazio's credit, again, the recruiting aspect there has been terrific. He's established himself as a guy who now not only recruits tough kids, he recruits athletic kids too, who get some speed. So there's a lot going on there in that backfield, but A.J. Dillon, certainly, if he's there, it changes the complexion for BC from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint.
I know that there have been a couple of programs here in the state of South Carolina who are envious of the tight end passing game that Boston College has. It seems like every week we say, oh, throw to the tight end more, throw to the tight end more. Well, they got a bunch in a stable that they use them in a way almost kind of like the way the Patriots use them, where they'll split them out, they'll put them in wings, they'll flex them, they'll motion them, and they really are dedicated to using the tight end. How does that change what other teams usually see on a weekly basis?
I think it changes because they don't see it. I think BC is the only team in the country that has that. BC has 6 or 7 tight ends that you can go deep with, and they can stretch the field. They'll act as fullbacks. They're hybrids. That's what they are. And they know coming into BC. I mean, if you're a tight end right now, this is the place you want to go. And that's another thing that Adazio's built around, too, from an offensive standpoint. If you're a pure tight end like Tommy Sweeney, who will be in the NFL next year, 6'5", 250 out of Don Bosco Prep in New Jersey, BC's at the top of your list. It's power. It's the 11 package, the 2 tight ends, the 1 back. They alternate the 12 packages as well. There's a lot going on there for tight ends. You know you're not only going to be a blocker, you're also going to be a receiver. So, that's a great dilemma. It's great for Adazio, but it's a bad dilemma for defensive coordinators. I'm sure Brent Venables this week has spent a lot of nights wondering how am I going to deal with those tight ends as well.
As we're looking at Boston College's defense, this is a group that, like I said earlier, took Clemson to the fourth quarter with only 7 points on the board. What is left on that defense that was in Death Valley a year ago, and how have they improved since then?
Well, it starts with your ends, Wyatt Ray and Zach Allen. And I know Clemson has the best defensive line in football, in college football, but those 2 guys, I think, could even start for Clemson. Those guys are just unbelievable pass rushers. They're game wreckers. They'll be in the NFL, no doubt. So those guys really make it go from the edge. They're going to have to get pressure on Trevor Lawrence. They have to somehow fluster him. We all know you beat a quarterback when you fluster him, and I think BC knows that. So the middle of the defense is anchored by Connor Strahan, a rangy linebacker, and Isaiah McDuffie, a kid out of Buffalo, a sophomore who has been phenomenal the last 4 weeks. He has 45 stops, and he's playing like a mini Luke Kuechly. So he has a nose for the ball. Their secondary is excellent. They're opportunistic. They're first in the ACC in interceptions. They got a kid named Hamp Cheevers out of Trenton, Florida, who's 5'9", 150, soaking wet, but he fights for every ball. He has 5 picks this year. So it's that feisty group. It's that tenacious group. They lost a lot, but they also have 2 anchors in safeties, Lucas Dennis and Will Harris. So they're pretty fortified back there.
As we're talking with John Metaperil, the voice of Boston College here on Sports Talk, we're looking at the Eagles here who take on Clemson 8 o'clock in Chestnut Hill at Alumni Stadium on Saturday night. Last one for you, John. How does BC win this game?
Well, I tell you what, they're going to have to create explosives and they're going to have to create turnovers. BC's done a great job in the last couple of weeks creating explosive plays, 15 yards plus. Turnovers, you've got to need it. You're going to have to force the ball in the air by Trevor Lawrence. Don't make ETN and that stable of Clemson backs beat you. I think they're a little bit concerned about that. If you get ETN on fire, look out. They got to fluster Lawrence, cop the ball up a few times, and BC make it a short field. I think special teams will get a factor in here. I know it's a cliche, but Michael Walker can flip the game as a returner, one of the top returners in the conference, both punting and kicking. So that's something to watch too. But I think BC's got a real good chance. I think the weather's going to be an element too. At 35 degrees, Clemson's not used to that. So they're going to have to pray on a couple things.
I have I have all the hand warmers and all my Northeast clothes that I'd put away in storage ready for Saturday night. But thanks so much for the time, John.
You're going to need it.
We're looking forward to a big game on Saturday. Thanks so much for the time.
Well, my pleasure. No problem. Thank you.
The voice of the Boston College Eagles, John Metaperil, here on Sports Talk as we do opposition research. A question left on the cutting room floor. Steve Adazio's contract goes until 2020. I have to think he is in line for an extension at the end of this season, especially because he'll have his highest win total as BC's head man. We'll come back and we'll take a look at the Florida Gators that get ready to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks. Chance for the Gamecocks to be bowl eligible. We'll talk about what the plan is at quarterback for Florida as they will not have Kyle Trask available to them after getting injured earlier this week in practice. Robbie Andrew of the Gainesville Sun joins us next as our opposition research continues here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
Continuing our opposition research here on Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Florida and South Carolina playing Saturday, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in the Swamp. Man who covers the Florida Gators for the Gainesville Sun. Robbie Andrew joining us here as we get ready for this game. Robbie, it's interesting. Florida, obviously a big part of the SEC East picture going into the season, and obviously with Dan Mullen in place, he tried to kind of be the quarterback whisperer. A lot of that plan has kind of been turned upside down with obviously the play of Felipe Franks and the injury to Kyle Trask. How would you assess where Dan Mullen sees that position as they sit right now with a couple of weeks to go in the season?
Well, Franks, he did a really nice job with Franks in the first part of the year when they were 6-1, beat LSU, and he was managing Franks, and Franks was managing the offense. But since the open date 2 weeks ago, they struggled, and Franks has really struggled with accuracy and turnovers, and he's regressed a little bit for the first time this year. So, the whole thing was going to be a quarterback competition this week between he and Trask, and an injury to Trask last night or Wednesday night practice took care of that. He's out for the rest of the year with a broken foot, so they're going to have to rely on Franks the rest of the way. And I think Mullen needs to find a way to get simple plays that he can know that Franks can execute and get him back to playing the way he was earlier in the year, as compared to these two losses in a row to Georgia and Missouri.
Is the biggest barrier, ability? Is it execution? I mean, what seems to be holding him back?
Yeah, well, the thing is, he's got he's got a great arm, a powerful arm. Sometimes he throws too hard. I think his big problem is maybe he is a second late on his read and decision making where to go with the ball, and he'll have a guy open, but he'll hesitate, and then by the time he throws, the guy's covered, and you're looking at a turnover or incomplete pass. So I think he is not real comfortable yet making real quick decisions, which you need to do as a quarterback. And I think that's his main problem. And then I think that when it gets to the money down third down, I think maybe he tenses up a little bit and tries to force things, and the result has not been good lately. They have had a real hard time converting third down and staying on the field.
Robbie, it's interesting looking at the talent around him, and it's weird. I almost kind of look at Florida State in the same light, where they had talent around, but obviously it underperformed under the previous administration, and we've talked about those problems previously. What has Dan Mullen done since he's been here to kind of maximize the talented skill positions that wasn't getting the same kind of output over the last administration?
Yeah, well, the thing is, he does have talent around him. I mean, you look at the two running backs, P. Ryan and Jordan Scarlett, and they've got receivers. And Mullen's done a great job of spreading the ball around. There's really no one guy you can target to try to cover. They spread it around in the passing game, and so he's done a really nice job of that. And the big problem, I think, is, and it's the same at FSU, the offensive line's an issue. And I mean, they've played a little bit better on paper. They look okay. They've only given up 11 sacks in 9 games, but Frank is getting hit all the time, and that's kind of altering his accuracy and things like that. So to me, the problem, they've got skill players, plenty of them to go around, but I think the problem has been on the offensive line, where a lot of times you don't have time to utilize those guys out on the perimeter.
You mentioned how they've looked since the open day. We're talking with Robbie Andrew, Gainesville Sun, joining us here on Sports Talk as we get ready for Florida and South Carolina. The Georgia game, I think that result, I don't want to say it was expected, but I think it's more reasonable. The Missouri result just seems eye-opening. And of course, we saw Missouri here earlier in the season, and a lot of different weather factors built into the fact that Missouri's offense couldn't get going and South Carolina's defense played well. But it seemed like that's a number with 38 points on the board for Missouri that I'm not expecting when it comes to Florida's defense. I thought they were a lot better than that. How do you assess it?
Yeah, I did too. And you look at it, it could have been more than 38 points in that game. So, and the thing is that Missouri was coming off a game where they against Kentucky where they did not get a first down in the second half, and yet they come into the Swamp and just throw it all over the place. And I know Drew Lock has a lot of talent guys around him, but it was a very uncharacteristic Florida defensive performance. Just the number of explosive plays was alarming, and they never seemed in sync. And then you talk to guys after the game talking about how some players took Missouri lightly, which I find hard to believe. These are guys that were on a 4-7 team a year ago. They got beat by that same team 45-16. So I think mentally Florida kind of has lost its edge here in the last couple of weeks. I know the focus has been trying to kind of get that back in practice this week, but now that there's less to play for, it's maybe hard to get that motivation going.
Yeah, and it's weird, bowl eligibility is not something that, is something that people from Florida like to necessarily strive to. The goals are usually a lot higher than that, regardless of how it seems these last couple of weeks go. I mean, Idaho is obviously a walkover opponent, and you would think that Florida State would be the same. Do you think an 8-9 win season for Florida is I guess, progress for fans who wanted more out of what was here previously before, Dan?
Yeah, I think it would be looked at as progress. And the thing is, there's been progress on the field, not just in the record, but on the field. And that's something that had been missing here for, 8-9 years, especially on offense. So they just kind of were stuck in a rut. And they've kind of gotten out of the rut. They've slipped back into it a little bit because of the play of Franks in the offensive line. But there has been progress. I think people will be, pretty happy with an 8 or 9 win season when, if you had told them that before the year, they would have gladly taken that. But as for the team, I think that Mullen had them thinking they were good enough to maybe play for a championship here in his first year. And then when they beat LSU and got to 6-1 and got into the top 10, I think then when they had these 2 games happen now and everything fell out, I think that's where mentally they're you have to wonder where they're at right now.
Robbie, this game has always kind of been close. A lot of kindred spirit between these two teams. You think about Spurrier being at Florida and South Carolina, and of course, Will Muschamp having that. These groups know each other very well as far as personnel and recruiting and things of that nature. How do you see this matchup playing out? Because it seems to me like it's probably one of the hardest games to peg because, Florida, if it's the first 6-7 weeks of the season, I'd say they'd roll. But if it's Florida the last 2 weeks, I think South Carolina has a chance.
Well, yeah, I think South Carolina has a very good chance. And, South Carolina has the kind of offense that, in a way, is a lot like Missouri, where you're very balanced and can make big plays in the passing game. So, Florida's defense doesn't show up like it did a week ago. They're going to give up a bunch of points. And, with this offense in the state it's in right now, I don't see Florida scoring a whole lot of points against, a very, very sound South Carolina defense. And, that's Muschamp's strength, and they're good there again. And, Florida's offense is going to struggle, I think. So it's going to be a matter of whether the defense shows up to play and can kind of contain South Carolina's offense a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at different avenues to success. I mean, where are Florida's avenues to success? Is it more by the run, or is it by the pass offensively? Will Franks need to have a big day for them to win this game, or can they get by with just running the football?
Well, no, you kind of their plan to win games, and it worked early in the year was have balance, get something going on the ground, and then you're able to throw the ball a little bit better. And then take care of the ball, which is something they haven't been able to do, and then turn the ball over for the other team. They have not done either one of those. They have not created turnovers, and they've turned the ball over. And if your team that's trying to build like this, you can't lose the turnover battle, or you're probably going to lose the game. And we've seen that here the last 2 weeks.
Where is Florida vulnerable defensively, and where do you think they're strongest?
One game they look strong everywhere. Another game they look weak and vulnerable everywhere. And lately, I think it's the fact that Marco Wilson, the cornerback, has been out since the Kentucky game. They're very thin in the secondary right now, and there's an injury at corner. They're in trouble, which we saw in the Georgia game where a guy wasn't capable of covering man to man. And Grantham's defense, you rely on a lot of man to man coverage in the secondary, and if you got a guy back there that can't cover, you're in trouble. And so to me, the depth in the secondary is a real problem, and then the same at linebacker. They don't have a lot of depth there either, so they got to keep guys healthy and in the game.
Yeah, ask Georgia fans how they felt about having Todd Grantham as a defensive coordinator. They'll tell you some horror stories.
Oh yeah. His defense is one game they look great, another game they look like they could give up 50 points. It's just a weird thing.
Robbie Andrew from the Gainesville Sun. How do you ultimately see this one playing out?
I do think it'll be a close game, but to me, I look at Florida, the way they played the last 2 weeks, they remind me a whole lot of last year's team, which is not a good thing because they were incapable of beating, teams like South Carolina, Missouri. So, if that team shows up again Saturday, I think, South Carolina has a chance to get out here with a win.
Robbie, appreciate the time as always. Enjoyed talking with you, and enjoy the game Saturday.
Yeah, thank you.
That's Robbie Andrew of the Gainesville Sun. Don't forget, we'll do 4th and Goal with Ellis Johnson coming up here to conclude the show on a Football Friday. But next, we'll go racing with Monty Dutton. The full Monty on NASCAR is next as we continue on Sports Talk on a Football Friday on South Carolina Radio Network.
latest on this weekend's race is around the corner. The full Monty on NASCAR is next. This is Sports Talk.
Welcome back into Sports Talk on this Friday night. It's time for the full Monty on NASCAR. We welcome in Monty Dutton of MontyDutton.com. Next to last race of the season at Phoenix. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Monty, very busy week, beginning with Kevin Harvick being penalized, docked 40 points, and now he is not automatically into the championship four. And I was wondering about things, the way he took off on that last restart last weekend at Texas and just shot away from the field, and you wondered if maybe something was different, and certainly something was.
Well, it's not the first time that Kevin Harvick has run away from the field, or Martin Truex or Kyle Busch. But I've been thinking about this whole thing a lot, and it sort of reminds me of the way that way back in the 70s, they decided to allow offensive linemen to use their hands in football. And the reason was that they were trying to reduce the number of holding penalties. Well, I'd say there's probably about 3 times as many holding penalties now as there were then. Well, NASCAR over about the same period, if you take it back and you retrace it, or maybe since the 80s, NASCAR has been trying to, they've become more and more, not picky, but attentive to detail. So that now they have all of these, they drive a car in this tunnel and laser beams measure everything. And yet it hasn't reduced the incidence of cheating. And I really do think that it's sort of, you go off the air on Sunday and everybody's talking about how Kevin Harvick is clearly now the favorite for the championship. And then all of a sudden in the middle of the week, he might not even make the Final Four. And so I guess it really reminds you, it's like, let's say there's an ACC football game and the officials messed up. And on Wednesday, the league office says, actually, they messed up. And then all of a sudden, they don't take away the win. It doesn't change anything. That's kind of the way NASCAR is. And I think that sort of doesn't do anything but make people grouse about it, about the sport. I think you have to have something where they have to have some balance between giving teams a chance to be giving them a chance to use their ingenuity, and then keeping it relatively fair. But I think things have gotten to where everything is so close that everybody's cheating a little.
Do you know what they did to the spoiler that was against the rules, and do you think whatever they did led to the performance of the car on Sunday?
Well, this is the second time that Harvick has had. They had that situation earlier when the rear window mysteriously sort of caved in or indented, And so I don't doubt that there's something mischievous afoot, but I think that the teams are supposed to use the spoilers that are exactly the ones issued them. And I think they may have figured out some kind of way. Now, this is just based on what I've read, to make it skew a little bit to the outside where more wind hits it. That seems to be the source, but it's hard to imagine. I mean, it's also hard to figure how, this piece that they now NASCAR made a mistake last weekend because they mistakenly thought Jimmy Johnson failed inspection 3 times, so they sent him to the back of the field, and he just failed it twice, and that was okay. Well, my God, if you have to go through inspection 3 times or 2 times to get through, and they check it that closely, what in the world happened between at the end of the race?
Yeah.
It's just, I can't help but think that NASCAR is just getting too litigious.
Yeah. I mean, how did they get through inspection with a spoiler that didn't meet the rules, that didn't meet the specs?
Well, I do know that because of the winning car, they always impound several and take them back to Charlotte to their research and development center, which apparently is even more high tech than the laser beam contraption at the track. And there is where they found something that was amiss. But it just seems like to me, at some level, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can't let it get to the point where a car scrapes the wall and then gets disqualified because his car doesn't meet the post-race fixture. There has to, at some level, there has to be, just like when you watch college football. Hell, they both back and receiver interfere on every play. It's just a matter of how much the tolerance is. And so, I'm always making analogies between NASCAR and other sports.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
And I mean, it's just because every sport has cheating. I saw a guy have to leave the field in a college football game because he didn't have any knee pads in the other day. And so it's hard to mix and match and prioritize. But I just think when there's so much, when you get guys who can't even qualify because they can't get the cars inspected, I just don't think it's good for the sport to have a system where wins get tainted so much. It has to be something. My God, if your car was right when you came on the beginning of the thing, is all right. But I mean, it's amazing to me that things like this happen.
Well, I agree. Full Monty on NASCAR with Monty Dutton. Real quick, because I want to leave time to talk about Phoenix, but Martin Truex Jr. signing on with Joe Gibbs Racing. He'll be in the 19 next season. Will that be a good fit?
Probably will, because he's taking his crew chief with him. I think it's a little bit sad because it's costing Daniel Suarez, the young driver, who's a rookie this year, his ride. And apparently, from what I've read right now, there's not any great opportunity. So, but by the same token, Mark Truex won the championship last year, and so as a business move, I mean, I think it sort of represents Joe Gibbs accepting the failure of supplying his team with talent that comes up through the ranks. It's like, like they come through the truck in the Xfinity Series driving that company's cars, and they get to the top, and they get 1 year and they're out. So I think that's a little bit sad, but that's just personal. I'm also glad that Martin Truex is landed on his feet, and I can't imagine it not being a better situation for Gibbs than the one that I can't imagine that Truex being in that car wouldn't be better than Suarez, but I just hate that Suarez is not getting a really good shot.
All right, so quickly as we go to Phoenix, Logano is already into the championship 4. We thought Harvick was in as well. He is not. He's got to race his way in now. Kyle Busch leads in the points. Truex Jr. is second right now. Harvick has won 9 times at Phoenix, so it stands to reason if he needed a place to win to get into the championship, this would be the place he would point to.
I wouldn't get in his way this weekend. There are other people can. Kyle Busch can win there. And I mean, it might be, people might run pretty hard just to keep Harvick out of the last race. But I still think, despite all of that, unless there's some unexpected thing that happens, I still think that the finalists will probably be Busch, Harvick, Truex, and Logano.
Do you think that people are going to get out of the way of the top contenders and let them have their way, or will we see some of the guys who are just out for a Sunday ride try and mix it up with them?
Well, it's a bit of a bone of contention. You'll recall that this past weekend, Eric Almirola got all bent out of shape because he didn't like the way somebody drove him because he had to win to get into the Final Four. As Logano often rubs people wrong on the racetrack. And I think that he got a lot of criticism because, wait a minute, he's running to win the race too. And so this is all supposed to be an individual sport, and where you go out there and you try to help yourself. And race fans often resent it when there are allegations of teamwork. But it is going to come into play because this system makes it where it almost has to. You can't blame people for using the rules to their advantage.
Absolutely. Monty, we thank you so much. Have a great racing weekend. We'll talk to you next week going into Homestead.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
That is Monty Dutton, the full Monty on NASCAR here on Sports Talk.
It is now time for 4th and Goal with Ellis Johnson, our last chance to delve into what's going on with Clemson and South Carolina. Of course, the Tigers getting ready for Boston College, South Carolina preparing for Florida. Both teams are in their respective locales. Quick update on what's going on the basketball scene. The Clemson men's basketball team leading North Carolina Central 40-20 at halftime. Amir Sims and David Scara each with 7. Clemson shooting 55% in the opening half. South Carolina, a little bit of a struggle against Stony Brook right now at the under 4 media timeout. Stony Brook leads South Carolina 26-24. Remember, South Carolina was trailing USC Upstate for a bit in that opening half as well, but came back to win. And Carolina once again struggling from the field, 38%. Stony Brook leading despite shooting 24%, Phil.
All right, very good. And Florida leading Charleston Southern 32-20. They're late in the first half in Gainesville. And, of course, there'll be a bunch of Gamecock fans in Gainesville tomorrow as South Carolina goes for the upset of Florida, and a lot of Tigers up in Boston to see if their team can clinch another division title against Boston College. We welcome in Ellis Johnson, longtime football coach and longtime football mind. Thank you for joining us. And, you know, when I look at this Florida game against South Carolina, Ellis, and I'll ask you from this angle, I think attitude's going to have a lot to do with who wins this game. I know talent wins out and mistakes also impact things, but where is Florida's mind after 2 straight losses, and where is South Carolina's mind coming off a nice road win at Ole Miss?
Yeah, that's a great point, Phil. I do think eventually as ball games wear on, the talent level and the mistakes and the guys that execute the plan, they practice the best during the week, normally come out on top. But there's some things that really do play into this, not to mention the quarterback issues. You know, they had made a quarterback change at Florida last week, and now the second-team quarterback who they might have given a chance to start, he had an unfortunate injury on Wednesday at the end of practice. So they've got a lot of distractions going on. I see where the so-called gurus out in Vegas still got them favored by a touchdown, but I just think this is a great opportunity for Carolina. I think they're still not really full speed with their roster. They've still got a few guys beat up, out of the lineup for practice sessions or out of the lineup for actually game time. But the depth is very questionable in some areas. But I do think they're playing better football now to their skill level than Florida is. So it's a great opportunity for them to go down there and make them bowl eligible if they can get that win. And there's a lot on the line for them in that game tomorrow.
So let me ask you about the Gamecocks and the situation in the secondary from your expertise on the defensive side. They've got 3 safeties who are out. They're juggling in new people. They're talking about using Shi Smith some at corner. How difficult is it to put a cohesive secondary together like that in just a week?
It's very difficult. And I think they can probably put 4 out there that can play with anybody in the league for a while. But when you have to go to that second, the number 2 guy, where are you then? And just the fact that they've got a wide receiver, and I know Shi is a very talented young man, and he's played that position in high school too, but that's a pretty desperate thing to have to look at going on the SEC road game and using one of your receivers at corner in an emergency. So they were thin there when the season started, and some of the younger players have panned out and given them good play this year. Some of them have not quite gotten there. But they were already a little bit thin there, and these injuries have really got them in a bind. And I think they've done an unbelievable job through the last couple of weeks, scratching out some wins and overcoming some of those situations on the depth chart.
Switching gears, Ellis, to what happens in Chestnut Hill Saturday. Clemson at Boston College. The weather's going to be in the middle 30s, at least in the depth of that game. I don't know how much of a factor that will have. I just want to know from your standpoint, I don't know how much you've seen of Boston College, but can this team give Clemson basically any kind of resistance? Because they certainly haven't seen it over the last 4 or 5 weeks.
No, I think they can, and I think probably playing at home and a little bit different weather, all those kind of little things can play into it a little bit. It just comes down, I guess, to each individual player taking care of the football a little bit more in the cold weather. I don't think it affects anything else. Clemson is playing some of their best football right now. They concerned me the first 2 or 3 games of the year. I didn't see a football team that looked like they had a bunch of returning first-rounders. They were a little bit up and down and not quite as dominant. But I tell you, their last 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know how they can play much better. They still had a few mistakes here and there and in some areas, but they're playing extremely well. Now, Boston College is a very physical team. Sometimes that location's been a little bit of I guess, a jinx for Clemson over history. I know they got beat one year up there in the early 80s when they were on a national caliber level, upset with, but it was, of course, it was Flutie, Doug Flutie. But I'm getting way back now. I'm showing my age. But I just think that Clemson right now is playing so well. The biggest challenge that Dabo and his staff has is just making them stay on that level of intensity and play to the skill level. They're so much better than the rest of that conference right now. There's parity in the ACC right now, but there's not a lot of quality.
Now, Dabo was a little bit concerned about the youth and inexperience in parts of his secondary. But Ellis, they put up points so big that, immediately the other team becomes one-dimensional, and the defensive assignments seem to just be easier for all of the back four. But tell me, if Boston College is able to keep this a fourth-quarter game, how much will that affect that young secondary that's used to having maybe a 3 or 4 touchdown lead?
It could. I think that if you go back and watch most of their games, when their front four has dominated, their secondary can play. When their front four hasn't dominated, like I thought the second week, Texas A&M's offensive line protected their quarterback extremely well until the last series where they knew Texas A&M had to throw the ball. And they got 2 of the 4 sacks they got in the whole game on that last series. But most of the time, the front is putting so much pressure on quarterbacks, the ball's coming out quick or coming out inaccurate. And they're not without talent back there. Like I said, they are just young. I don't see Boston College being able to win this ball game unless Clemson's not Clemson tomorrow. As long as they play as well as they can play, I just don't see it's a ball game. They have had problems in recent years with the bump and grind. I call them the bumper car teams that want to play a little bit, box ball, if you will. They keep the ball game going on in between the tackles and don't turn it into a jet-set ball game like Clemson does. But I don't know that they can do that. I mean, that'll be what they'll have to try to do, but I just don't know if they can do that and handle this Clemson team this year. They're too good up front.
All right, final minute with Ellis Johnson, 4th and goal here on Sports Talk. I got to look ahead, as we'll do again next week with you, but South Carolina and Clemson a couple of weeks down the road, do you see, and we'll see what South Carolina does tomorrow, but do you see the Gamecocks closing the ground any on the Tigers and being able to make it a competitive game up in the Valley?
I think Carolina's played extremely well with who they're having to put on the field, but if they don't get their depth chart back, to some quality strength, it'll be almost an impossible task to go up there and beat Clemson. Clemson will have to beat Clemson for them to lose that ball game. And so if Clemson stays healthy and they continue to play the way they have the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's going to be a tough task. That being said, I mean, we all know any given day, one of those teams can beat each other because they all got good players. But
sure.
Their roster right now, their depth chart right now they've really got to get some guys back on the field before they're going to be able to put a bunch of guys out there they can feel good about the 2D.
Coach, we thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Another edition of 4th and Goal with Ellis Johnson. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Phil. Enjoyed it, man.
You got it, my man.
Guy's so good. He's so good.
Yeah, I'd love to sit down in a meeting, be the fly on the wall to listen to Ellis Johnson and Will Muschamp talk defense. Man here, I think, elbow here, toes pointed here.
I think a lot of that'll probably be the most silent you'll hear Will Muschamp, because I know that he understands and respects the sage wisdom that Mr. Johnson brings to the table.
I sure hope somebody gives him another crack as a defensive coordinator. I know he would love to get back on the field and not only coach but recruit. He still has that fire to be able to go out and recruit. And, I mean, how can you just not take advantage of all that knowledge?
You can't.
All right, South Carolina Gamecocks struggling, only up 32-31 on Stony Brook. 30 seconds to go in the half. Clemson up at the half, 40-20. And Charleston Southern is trailing Florida at the half, 36-20. And the qualifying ongoing at Phoenix, it's who else? Kevin Harvick right now on the pole, probably going to win the pole and probably win the race. Everybody have a great football weekend, and we'll see you back Monday night here on Sports Talk.